Love ends the moment you stop pretending it hasn't. The house smelled like lavender that summer, candles I'd bought to mask the scent of paint from the nursery we'd finished 3 years before. The refrigerator hummed its tired song, a low mechanical drone that filled the silence between dinner and sleep. A coffee ring stained the counter near the sink, perfect and brown, like a wedding band pressed into wood. Every evening at 7, my daughter Emma would come home from the bridal boutique with fabric samples fanned across her lap, like cards she was afraid to play. Ivory and champagne, and something called blush that looked exactly like ivory to me. Every evening, David would pour wine into 2 glasses, never asking if I wanted any, just assuming, and carry them to his study, where the door would close with the softest click. A sound so polite, it felt like a lie. This isn't fiction. This is how love disappears, one small truth at a time. We had been married 26 years when Emma got engaged. 26 years of mortgages and arguments about whether to replace the deck, of family dinners that ended with David falling asleep on the couch while I loaded the dishwasher alone. We had become a routine so practiced, it felt like intimacy. On weekends, he mowed the lawn in straight lines, the kind of precision that used to charm me and had slowly become something I resented without knowing why. I planted geraniums along the fence. We spoke in shorthand. Did you, and I will, and maybe tomorrow. Full sentences had become unnecessary somewhere around year 15. Emma's engagement was supposed to be a renewal. That's what I told myself, a reason to fill the house with noise again, to bake again, to care about tablecloths and centerpieces and whether the string quartet knew canon in D. She was marrying a kind man named Michael who worked in architecture and once brought me tulips just because it was Tuesday. He had steady hands and a patient smile, and he looked at Emma the way people look at miracles, with disbelief and gratitude. I loved him the way mothers love the men their daughters choose, with hope and a little bit of fear that it wouldn't last. David seemed lighter those weeks. He laughed more. He asked Emma questions about the venue, about the guest list, about her dress. He became engaged in a way he hadn't been engaged in anything for years, not in our conversations, not in our life, not in the small rituals that had once held us together. One evening in early June, over pasta I'd made with too much garlic, Emma mentioned she was struggling with her vows. I don't know how to say what I feel without sounding like a greeting card, she said, twisting her fork through linguine she wasn't eating. Everything I write sounds fake. David set down his wine. The glass made a soft sound against the wooden table. I could help, he said, if you want. Emma's face brightened in a way it hadn't brightened for me in months. Really? Of course, I'm good with words. You know that. He was. David had been a copywriter before he moved into management, back when we still talked about his work, back when I still read the things he wrote and told him they were beautiful, back when I meant it. I smiled at them across the table, at my husband offering to help our daughter find the language for love, and felt something I mistook for gratitude. That would be amazing, Dad, Emma said. They started meeting in his study after dinner. At first it was twice a week, then 4 times, then every night. I didn't think anything of it. Why would I? A father helping his daughter, a man who loved words teaching someone who didn't. I would pass the closed door on my way to fold laundry or check my emails and hear their voices, hers bright and laughing, his low and patient. Sometimes I'd hear the clink of glasses. Sometimes I'd hear nothing at all, just the hum of the ceiling fan and the faint rustle of paper. I didn't know then that this would be the last summer I believed in my own house. The first crack appeared on a Thursday. I had come upstairs to tell them dinner was almost ready, grilled chicken, the kind David liked with lemon and thyme, and I paused outside the study door. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but something in the silence made me stop. It was too complete, too full, the kind of silence that has weight. Then I heard Emma laugh, not the laugh she used with me, the one that was performative, designed to show she was listening. This was different, lower, almost private. Then David's voice, so soft I had to lean closer to hear. You don't have to write what you think you should feel, he said. Write what you actually feel. I don't even know what that is anymore, Emma whispered. A pause. Long enough for my hand to reach for the doorknob. Long enough for me to pull it back. Yes, you do, David said. And his voice, God, his voice, it sounded the way it used to sound when he spoke to me. Before the mortgage, before the silence, before we became two people living parallel lives under the same roof. I stepped away from the door. My heartbeat stumbled. I told myself I was imagining things. I told myself it was just a father and daughter working on something beautiful. I told myself I was being ridiculous. But that night, I couldn't sleep. I lay beside David in the dark and listened to him breathe, and I realized I couldn't remember the last time we'd touched on purpose. After that, I started noticing things. Small things. Things I should have seen before but had chosen not to. The way Emma's text to me became shorter. One-word answers. Fine. Busy. Later. The way David started showering before dinner instead of after his morning run. The way he wore cologne on weeknights, cologne I'd bought him for Christmas 2 years ago that he'd never opened. The way the study door was always closed now, even when no one was inside. One evening, I found a receipt on the counter, dinner at a restaurant I'd never heard of, Italian, expensive, downtown, 2 glasses of wine, an appetizer we never ordered at home, burrata with truffle honey, $63 before tip. I held it between my fingers and felt the paper bend. When David came into the kitchen, I asked him about it. Work dinner, he said without looking up from his phone. Clients from Denver. I nodded. I didn't ask why it was dated on a Wednesday. The same Wednesday, Emma had said she was working late at the boutique. I didn't ask why he'd paid with the credit card we only used for personal expenses. I didn't ask because I was afraid of the answer. I put the receipt in my pocket. Later, I threw it away. Then I dug it out of the trash and smoothed it flat and put it in a drawer with the utility bills, like evidence I might need someday. Some weeks later, I woke at 2 a.m. and David's side of the bed was empty. The sheets were cool. He'd been gone a while. I walked downstairs, my bare feet cold against the hardwood, and saw light under the study door. I stood there, my hand hovering near the wood, and I heard voices, both of them, laughing about something I wasn't part of. Then the laughter stopped. Silence stretched. 10 seconds. 20. 30. I turned and went back to bed. I didn't knock. I didn't interrupt. I told myself they'd fallen asleep mid-sentence. I told myself Emma had driven over because she couldn't sleep and needed her father's advice. I told myself so many things that night that by morning I'd almost made myself believe them. But belief is different from knowing. And I knew. The unraveling happened slowly, the way paint peels in humidity, first at the edges, then all at once. I started watching them. Not obviously, just paying attention. The way Emma touched David's shoulder when she walked past him. The way he poured her wine before he poured mine. The way they shared glances across the table that I was never meant to intercept. Small moments of recognition that excluded me completely. I began looking for evidence I didn't want to find. I checked his phone one morning while he showered. Nothing. Texts to Emma about wedding planning, about vows, about whether the ceremony should be indoors or out. All perfectly innocent. All perfectly normal. I checked Emma's jacket pockets when she left it on the couch. A folded piece of paper with her handwriting. I don't know how to stop feeling this way. I put it back. My hands shook. I made coffee. I pretended I hadn't seen it. The house felt larger those weeks. Every room echoed. I started cleaning compulsively, wiping counters that were already clean, folding towels that didn't need folding. I rearranged the living room twice. I planted flowers I didn't care about, petunias and impatiens, and something the woman at the nursery said would bloom until frost. I became a woman, performing the motions of a life that no longer fit. One night, Emma stayed for dinner and brought Michael. He talked about the wedding, about the honeymoon they'd planned in Greece, about how lucky he was. His eyes shone when he spoke about her. He reached for her hand across the table. She let him hold it, but her eyes drifted to David, who nodded and smiled and refilled Michael's glass. And I watched my daughter watch my husband with an expression I recognized because I'd worn it myself 26 years ago. The look of someone falling. After they left, I stood at the sink, washing dishes that could have waited until morning. David came up behind me and put his hand on my waist, a gesture that once meant affection but now felt like apology. "She's going to be a beautiful bride," he said. I turned off the water. "Yes," I said. "She will." He kissed the side of my head and walked away, and I stood there hands wet, staring at my reflection in the dark window, and I thought, I've already lost them both. I tried to talk myself out of it. I made lists of reasons why I was wrong. Emma loved Michael. David loved me. Families were close. Fathers and daughters had special bonds. What I was imagining was twisted, impossible, the product of a mind that had too much time and not enough purpose. But the evidence kept accumulating. Small betrayals I couldn't ignore. David started working from home more often. Emma started visiting more frequently. Their reasons were always plausible. He had a deadline, she needed help with the seating chart. But the hours they spent together lengthened, the door stayed closed, and I stopped being invited into conversations that had once included me. One afternoon in late July, I came home early from the grocery store and found Emma's car in the driveway. I hadn't known she was coming over. I carried bags into the kitchen and heard music playing upstairs. Something I didn't recognize. Jazz, maybe. The kind David used to play when we were young and he was trying to seduce me. I put away the groceries, I wiped down the counters, I folded the reusable bags and put them in the pantry. Then I walked upstairs and stood outside the study door and listened. Silence. No voices. No laughter. Just music and the creak of floorboards and a sound that might have been breathing. I went to our bedroom. I sat on the edge of the bed. I stared at the wall and felt something inside me harden. Not anger, not yet. Just a cold, clear understanding that the life I thought I had was already gone. The confrontation happened in the kitchen on a Sunday morning. Emma had stopped by to pick up a box of old photo albums. David was making coffee. I was sitting at the table with my hands wrapped around a mug that had gone cold. I hadn't planned to say anything. I'd rehearsed 1,000 different conversations in my head. But when the moment came, the words arrived on their own. "I need to ask you something," I said. They both looked at me. The air changed. "Are you in love with each other?" The words came out flat. Factual, like I was asking if it might rain. Emma's face went white. David set down the coffee pot. "Mom, don't," I said. My voice didn't shake. I was surprised by that. "Just don't." David sat down across from me. Emma stayed standing, her hand gripping the back of a chair so tightly her knuckles turned white. For a long time, no one spoke. The refrigerator hummed. A car passed outside. Somewhere in the house, a faucet dripped. "It's not what you think," David said finally. I almost laughed. "Then tell me what it is." He looked at Emma. She looked at the floor. Her breathing was shallow, fast, like she might be sick. "We didn't mean for it to happen," Emma whispered. And there it was, the truth I'd been circling for weeks, spoken aloud in the kitchen where I'd fed her breakfast for 18 years. The truth that made every memory a lie, every laugh a betrayal, every moment I'd stood outside that door and walked away an act of cowardice. "How long?" I asked. "It doesn't matter," David said. "How long?" Emma's voice was so small I almost didn't hear it. "Since May." 3 months. 3 months of vows written in secret. 3 months of wine and whispers and doors that stayed closed. 3 months of me pretending I didn't know what I knew. I stood up. My chair scraped against the floor. I looked at my daughter who had my eyes in my mother's hands and who I'd loved before I knew what love could cost. And I said the only true thing I had left. "You need to leave." She started crying. David reached for my arm. I stepped back. "Both of you," I said. "I need you both to leave." They didn't move. Emma's tears fell silently, streaking her face with mascara she shouldn't have been wearing at 10 in the morning. David opened his mouth to speak, then closed it. He looked older suddenly, tired. "Please," I said, my voice cracked. "Just go." They left. The door closed. The house went silent. I sat back down at the table and stared at the coffee mug and the morning light coming through the window, and I thought, this is what the end looks like. Quiet. Ordinary. A Sunday like any other Sunday, except nothing will ever be the same. After that, the days blurred. I moved through them like a sleepwalker. I canceled Emma's bridal shower. I told my sister I had the flu. I stopped answering calls. David stayed at a hotel downtown, the kind with a gym and complimentary breakfast, and rooms that all look identical. He texted me once. "Can we talk?" I didn't respond. Emma came by one afternoon when she knew David wouldn't be there. She stood in the doorway like a stranger and asked if we could sit down. I let her in. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where everything had shattered, and she folded her hands in front of her like a child waiting to be scolded. "I'm so sorry," she said. I didn't ask what she was sorry for. Sorry for loving him? Sorry for betraying me? Sorry for being human in a way I couldn't forgive? "I know," I said. "I didn't mean to hurt you." I know that too, she cried. I didn't. I felt hollowed out, like someone had scooped everything vital from inside me and left only the shape of a woman who used to be a mother, a wife, a person who believed in permanence. Are you going to tell Michael? I asked. She looked at me with red eyes. I don't know. You should, I said. He deserves the truth. What if he leaves me? Then he leaves you, she flinched. I wasn't trying to be cruel. I was trying to be honest. Honesty was all I had left. Do you hate me? She asked. I thought about it, really thought about it. No, I said. I don't. How can you not hate me? Because you're my daughter, I said. And because hating you would require more energy than I have. She nodded. She left. I watched her car pull away and realized I didn't know if I'd ever see her again. In the weeks that followed, I learned how to live alone in a house built for 3. I moved David's things to the garage, his clothes, his books, the framed photo of us on our wedding day. I repainted the study pale blue, covering the deep green he'd chosen years ago. I stopped cooking meals that required more than one plate. I became efficient, economical, small. Some nights, I would sit in the living room with all the lights off and replay the past year in my mind, looking for the moment it all went wrong. But there was no single moment, just 1,000 small choices, his and hers and mine. Doors left closed, questions left unasked, silences that grew comfortable until they became unbearable. I didn't hate them. That was the strangest part. I wanted to. Hate would have been easier, but instead I felt a kind of exhausted sadness, like watching something beautiful burn and knowing there's nothing you can do but let it turn to ash. I tried to understand how it happened, how a father could look at his daughter and see something other than the child he'd raised, how a daughter could look at her father and feel something other than daughterly love. But understanding required empathy I couldn't access. Every time I tried to imagine their perspective, I hit a wall made of my own pain. David called one evening in October. Leaves were falling outside, red and gold, covering the lawn I no longer cared about. She ended it, he said. I didn't ask who ended what. I knew. Good, I said. She's going to marry Michael. Good. A pause. I miss you. I closed my eyes. You don't miss me, David. You miss the idea of not being alone. That's not fair. No, I said. It isn't. I never stopped loving you. Then you should have tried harder to show it. We stayed on the line for a while, 2 people who used to share a life, breathing into silence. Then I hung up. I didn't call back. Emma got married in November. I wasn't invited. I heard about it from my sister, who heard it from someone at church. Small wedding, immediate family only. They'd moved the date up, made it intimate. I spent that day cleaning out closets and donating clothes I'd been meaning to give away for years. I found a photo of the 3 of us from a vacation in Maine. Emma was 7, gap-toothed and sunburned, standing between me and David on a beach. We all looked so happy, the kind of happy you can only be when you don't know what's coming. I didn't throw it away. I put it in a drawer I rarely open. Winter came. Snow covered the lawn. I learned to shovel the driveway myself. I learned to fix the garbage disposal when it jammed. I learned 100 small tasks David used to handle, and each one felt like proof that I didn't need him, that I could survive this. But survival isn't the same as healing. I still thought about them. I wondered if Emma's vows to Michael were honest, or if somewhere in them, hidden between promises and declarations, there was a ghost of the words my husband helped her write. I wondered if David lay awake at night in his hotel room and regretted what he'd done, or if he only regretted getting caught. I wondered if they ever thought about me, not as the woman they'd betrayed, but as the person I'd been before betrayal turned me into someone I didn't recognize. Some nights, I would pour myself a glass of wine and sit at the kitchen table and try to remember the last time I'd been truly happy. Not content, not comfortable, happy. I couldn't find it. The memory had dissolved, eroded by years of routine and compromise, and the slow death of intimacy. Maybe that was the real tragedy. Not what they did, but what we'd become before they did it. Spring arrived slowly. The geraniums came back. I hadn't expected them to, but they pushed through the soil anyway, stubborn and red. I took it as a sign of nothing, just flowers doing what flowers do. David asked for a divorce in April. The papers arrived by mail, impersonal and thorough. I signed them without reading every line. What was the point? The marriage had ended long before the legalities caught up. Emma sent me a card for Mother's Day. Store-bought. Generic. Thinking of you. No return address, no phone number. Just her name signed at the bottom in handwriting I used to know as well as my own. I didn't write back. My sister asked me once if I thought I'd ever forgive them. We were sitting on her porch, drinking iced tea, watching her grandchildren play in the yard. I don't know, I said. You should try, she said. For your own sake. Maybe, I said. But not yet. Forgiveness is not something you give because you're strong. It's something you give because carrying the weight of refusal is too exhausting. And some days I almost forgive them. Not because what they did was forgivable, but because staying angry requires a kind of energy I no longer have. But almost isn't the same as actually. And I'm not there yet. Maybe I never will be. I still live in the house. I kept the geraniums. I repainted the kitchen. I learned to sleep in the center of the bed. I became someone new, not better, not worse, just different. A woman who knows that love is not a promise, but a risk. That betrayal doesn't always come from strangers. That sometimes the people who hurt you most are the ones you die to protect. Years can pass inside a single evening. I learned that the night I stood outside the study door and didn't knock. I learned it again the morning I asked the question I already knew the answer to. I learned it every day after, in the silence that stretched between who I was and who I had to become. I don't wish them harm. I don't wish them happiness either. I wish them the truth, whatever that looks like, whatever it costs. I wish them the same thing I wish for myself, the grace to survive what cannot be undone. Some nights, I still hear their laughter through walls that no longer hold them. I hear the clink of glasses, the rustle of paper, the silence that followed. Too long to be innocent, too quiet to be anything but what it was. And in those moments, I understand that love doesn't end when it breaks. It ends when you finally stop mourning what you thought it was and accept what it became. I unlocked the door. I never went back.